All right, folks, I am here. We're both here. We're live. We're on Zoom. I'm here with Chloe Zuberbuhler. And I came across you recently on Facebook by a post that somebody else shared that here in the Freeport, Illinois area for the election on February 23rd, you are a candidate for the Freeport Township Trustee. Now, for people who aren't too terribly familiar with local government, what exactly does that position do?
Sure. So township pretty much acts as a checks and balances system for our local government. You'll actually find in a lot of other cities, especially ones that are like ours, they don't actually utilize township. It's kind of just the government. You'll see township in more rural areas a lot in terms of like roads and making sure that those kinds of things are good. Ours actually doesn't even really deal with the roads and transportation. We pretty much cover the budget. So we'll review, modify, or suggest modifications, and ultimately approve the budget. Besides that, work with the tax assessors to make sure property values are, kind of where we want them to be. And that's good in a lot of different ways for, promoting value within Freeport's land. And like I said, kind of checks and balances. And then the other thing is, sorry, I'm kind of going spacey. The biggest thing that actually specifically interested me was that we use, the leftover taxpayer money to offer services for citizens. So last year they created a COVID relief fund that people could apply to. In other senses, we help, veterans or the elderly or just anybody who might need assistance from, our government.
Okay. All right. That makes a lot of sense. What is it specifically, I guess I should say, about that elected position that makes you want to run for it?
Right. So I think the biggest thing for me is the services that they offer. So I am a big proponent for, if everyone in Freeport's lives can be enriched on the same scale, then we all, all boats float with a high tide in a sense. So we all succeed when everybody is given, a similar opportunity to our neighbors. So if these services are really important to people who might be more down and out, who can't necessarily apply for welfare or other services, that's kind of the biggest thing that drew me to this position, is wanting to, help our citizens get to better places.
Okay. What now obviously you're specifically running for Freeport Township Trustee. Was there anything in particular that just made you want to be involved in local politics or just politics in general?
Yeah, definitely. So I moved back to Freeport in 2018. I am a Freeport native, born and raised, and have lived in Madison, Wisconsin, Chicago, Illinois. And my partner, Zach, and I moved back here in 2018 and to kind of start our own lives. We started our own businesses. We purchased a building in downtown Freeport that we've been renovating since. And for me, there were a lot of opportunities, but then starting to, get a little more involved in the local government in terms of, our needs and our interest in developing Freeport. We just saw a lot of, over bureaucracy, red line kind of red tape, certain things like that kind of put a bad taste in our mouths. We wanted to obviously affect that. And the township doesn't necessarily affect what we're doing, but it was things like that, experiencing glitches in our system that made me really want to get involved. And then additionally, this past summer, seeing how certain things have worked out in our town, how our officials have, handled certain things, specifically around Black Lives Matter protests, making sure that our police system is in checks, with other people in our city, just wanting to kind of looking at it and knowing, things don't end with our president, they don't end with our mayor, they don't end with our Congress or Senate representatives. We as the citizens really have to have our hand in the ring and, make sure that things are running the way that we would like to see them. So just kind of with the uprising and being active in our country and in our cities alone was something that really inspired me to go down this path.
Okay. Well, and I think that a lot of times we tend to have a reverse view of things, because the national media outlets are trying to service all of America. They tend to start at the top and cover down,
Yeah.
whereas where it is you actually live, especially somebody who lives in a town like Freeport, Illinois, I think to most people it gets completely overlooked how important those positions are and how they actually have much
Right.
more of a bearing on your life than actually what Congress is doing
Exactly.
how many thousands of miles away. I don't know the exact geography, but it's
Exactly.
not close.
Yeah.
Were you in downtown living in that building downtown this past summer?
No, we were still renovating, and right now we don't necessarily live here completely. It's kind of where I'm sitting right now is our storage space, our product shop place for my business. We have it kind of decorated as a hangout spot, but yeah, ultimately we will live in here, and we'll kind of live in between all of the floors as we renovate up. But yeah,
Okay.
it's nice being here.
Yeah. What's your guys' business? What do you guys do?
So my business is I run an online retail shop on Etsy. So I sell mid-century modern furniture, vintage home decor, kind of anything that fits my style. I have kind of a bohemian, eclectic, kind of all over the place. But yeah, I sell stuff like that online. And ultimately, we're going to be moving my items into the first floor into kind of a showroom that will ultimately transition into retail in the downtown space. And then besides that, I do freelance writing and marketing consultancy for local businesses.
Oh, wow. Wow. That I've always felt that it's sad, not that it's horrible, but the current state of downtown Freeport, because I feel like downtown Freeport has so much
Yeah,
unlocked potential
definitely.
that if we could get back to, and it was kind of like being, sort of the age I am. I remember being a kid before everything on the south side of town had gotten built up and downtown was
Right.
the spot. You used to have the plaza downtown and
Yeah,
God, all the stores were down there. It was so cool when you'd hop in the car and head to downtown Freeport. And now it's like it's unfortunate you drive by because, and that's as a side note, that's really, really awesome that you're renovating because
yeah,
so many of those buildings down there are beautiful if somebody would put the time and work into them. So
exactly.
my hats off to you guys for doing that. That's incredible. So
Thank you. No, it's been really enjoyable, and we feel that same sentiment. I mean, Freeport has so much potential, and we have a lot of potential in all of our districts. But if you start with the hub and build out, there's a lot more likelihood for success. And we've got the infrastructure downtown. Like you said, there's so many beautiful buildings, and even walking through our place, it can be kind of scary to walk through it with first eyes, but once you get in here, it's just cosmetic. It's mostly just taking out the trash and then working with what you've got. So yeah, we're really excited to be down here, and it's cool since being here to see like people that we know, people that we don't know. I was speaking to somebody the other day who said that because we have an Instagram account that we kind of post updates to, and they said that they had been following our account and that inspired them to renovate another part of a building in downtown Freeport, or we were doing our facade this summer and seeing other people start to say, oh, I might dress up the front of my storefront as well too. It's just really cool to see the domino effect of that, and that to see people really care and invest in the community that we're in.
that's really awesome. Yeah, and sometimes it just takes one person to get started. So
Yeah,
that is really cool. I would love it. It'd be so cool if like downtown became the hub,
yeah,
especially because so many towns in the area, you've been, granted, it's a much bigger town, but like the whole downtown district in Madison is just a blast. It's a
right,
lot of fun. I mean, Main Street in
exactly.
Galena is like legendary, you know,
Yeah,
so many of those
right.
places that, they're beautiful and they're cleaned up and they've got a whole variety of shopping options and restaurants. And yeah, God, if we could get that in downtown Freeport again, that would be
Definitely.
absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring up Galena because I think of Galena a lot when it comes to Freeport. I mean, just a decade ago, or even looking at places like Beloit, looking at other places around us where they might have been 10 years, 20 years ago, is a similar place that Freeport is currently at or has been. I really feel like there's an upswing in Freeport and that we are an artist hub. I mean, the amount of musicians and artists and creative types and entrepreneurs that are in my friend group alone is inspiring and I like to say that we're a town built on industry, but that emanates creativity. So we are just a lot of doers and movers and makers, and might as well take advantage of that and use what we have. I mean, I think we have a lot of potential to be similar to a Galena or Madison or Beloit, definitely.
I think so too. The unfortunate thing, it kind of seems like the crux that Freeport's ends up stuck in, that unfortunately a lot of Midwest towns did, that through the 40s and 50s there was all this, just like you said, industry that was going on that built the town to begin with, and a lot of that industry, unfortunately since then has left. And so it's really going to take a lot of, just like you said, I guess, ingenuity and innovativeness and creativeness to bring those back. And there, just like we were talking about Galena, we've seen towns that have been able to do it. So it's definitely not impossible. So that is, like I said, my hat's off to you guys for doing it. That's really, really awesome. What are your, having been born and raised here, what would you say your overall view of Freeport as a town is?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, because it's definitely changed. I mean, when I left when I was 18 to go to college and move on to down my career path, it was kind of a leave and never come back mentality. And I feel like a lot of people had felt that back then, and even may still feel that way. But I always kind of felt drawn back to Freeport, even between Madison and between Chicago, between Champaign. Always found myself kind of staying here for a couple months stints and finding myself back in, like, completely wildly into the community and participating in all that. I just think that over the years I've come to really appreciate what Freeport has to offer. And I think the biggest thing that anyone can look at Freeport for is, it's not something that's just going to give you whatever you want without any work. It's really what you put into it, what you make of this space. And I think there's a vibrancy and a magnetism. It's wild how all the places I've been and, people I've met that had no connection to Freeport whatsoever, how they connect to this place, and how, random, like, connecting the dots has brought everyone to this place, or they know who we are. And I just really, like I said, I think the biggest thing is that there's a lot of, individual mindsets, creative people who want to pretty much make what they want out of the world. I mean, that was how I felt being in Chicago, working in more of a corporate structure. That just wasn't the vibe for me, I guess. And being able to come here, it's an affordable place. You can buy property here for much cheaper than you can in any other place, and it's still the same quality. And you can, the expense of living is cheaper and more affordable. We do have good school districts. We have services in this town, programs and such. I really love Freeport. It's weird to have been a person who was very against it probably a decade ago, and now I'm like Freeport's biggest fan. I really think there's a lot of opportunity here, and like I said, it's absolutely what you make of it, and I feel like there is going to always be that draw to this space.
I agree 100%. I think I was probably more than a few years ahead of you, but it was the exact same attitude, having been born here and sort of grew up here, that you got to a point where when it was time to go and leave the nest, it was adios, goodbye, never looking back. And then 10 years ago, when me and my wife got together and we wanted to find a place to buy a house and begin our family, this is where we came to, and this is where we've been ever since, and where we'll be, obviously for the long term. Kids go to the school district here, they love it. It's a really great place, and I, just like you were saying, I laugh. I have several friends who live in Chicago, and you, having lived there, you understand this too. That the amount of times that we go back and forth, because for what it costs to buy this house and the monthly bills that I have for it. I have friends who live in the Chicago area who have like 1 or 2 bedroom apartments who are paying triple what I pay for this house.
Exactly.
So I think there's a real positive draw there. I think I definitely think it's a wonderful place, and gosh, I hope more people come. What do you see, like, beyond, because of course right now we're talking about the election that's coming up on February 23rd. Do you have any notion in your head for where you may want to go after that?
Like after township? I mean,
Yeah.
in terms of our political structure? That's a good
Yeah.
question. For now, I'm kind of township. I'm sticking to it. I could definitely see that evolving, especially after being in it and kind of seeing how that works. I know my partner Zach has always been somebody who's interested in, perhaps running for city council one day. We like to stay active in our politics and at the very least, be vocal in our forums. So I think, yeah, no big plans ahead, but this was just something that seemed like it, especially with my busy life, it seemed like it could fit into that structure really well. And I could be making a difference. I could be having an impact in the community. So no big plans to run for mayor yet. Definitely a possibility.
Okay. All right. The gosh, this it's so wild to think about. I have so many pictures on my phone from Freeport this past summer where it was kind of like it was joyous to see. It was also chaotic.
Hmm.
The pictures I have on my phone of driving through downtown Freeport and so many of the businesses that were boarded up because of fear of what could potentially go south. And I think by and large it was relatively peaceful. There were, I think, from what I understand, a few minor infractions by people, but by and large, I don't
Right.
even remember the date, but there was that date that there was the big march in downtown.
Yeah,
It
I
was
was there
really,
for
really
that.
awesome to see.
Yeah.
Did you get to see that?
Yeah. I participated in the March on Stevenson that Illinios and Anthony, they set that up with a couple other people in town. That was really important. I also participated in the one out at the park at the band shell, and that one was really powerful too. They had the whole, at both of them, either one we knelt or laid down on our stomachs for the 8.5 minutes that George Floyd was down on the ground. And those were very powerful. And we were also here for the first one, which is the one reason that, a lot of people were boarding up, which was pretty unfortunate to see, especially, us owning property in downtown. We were not going to board ourselves up. And we actually put out a couple of posts on our separate social medias saying, whatever happens to our building, to our real estate is absolutely pales in comparison to actual lives lost to police brutality and the actual violence that people in our own community experience from our systems, or even just the racial profiling people in our community experience, and that their voices needed to be heard. And so we started out at the very first protest. I had been working down here and knew that it was it was kind of just, we got a text maybe at like 5 p.m. saying this is about to happen. And I was leaving work anyway and saw a couple of friends down there, made a quick Black Lives Matter sign on an old piece of cardboard and showed up in my Carhartt overalls all dirty. And it was really cool. I mean, it was the first one started out really powerful in itself, and it started smaller, and we did a little march, and people were able to kind of shout and be vocal about the frustrations they feel, which I think is necessary. I mean, it's hard to say, fight fire with fire, but I tend to not necessarily blame a community of people who have had violence against them for their entirety of being in this country, for the entirety of living in a red line city, feeling frustrated and maybe airing those frustrations. And so we actually left and then came back when we knew that stuff was starting to get a little rowdy downtown, and kind of just posted up, not really participating in that, but stayed outside our building, just, like seeing people pass by and such. And it was heartbreaking to be a part of that. I remember sitting in the car and crying with my partner, just like not really knowing what to do, what to feel. We aren't the ones who are the most affected by this. We are two very privileged white people, so it wasn't up to us how things went down. And we did see, amidst the chaos, it did not, a few straight individuals, were angry and participated in not great acts, but at the same time there were all kinds of other people who were there because they were upset and they felt that they needed their voices to be heard. And then it was really disappointing for us to how quickly, especially being a downtown person, and I'm being a little too candid right now, but I mean, might as well. But it was disappointing to me to see how quickly our downtown community rallied around boarding businesses up, making sure the police were getting free lunches after they had been tear gassing and rubber, and pepper spraying our citizens in the streets, while there was an absolute lack of rallying around the people who felt this pain, and who were rallying for peaceful protests. And the fact that the second protest, the third, the fourth protest were all sprung up after the chaos of the first one in a response to, we don't believe that we should be handling this in this kind of way. We want to protest this in a peaceful way. The plan is to be peaceful. They all were a response to that first one. They were a counter response. And so it was unfortunate to have, these inspiring individuals create these events and as a way to say, we have the ability to protest this in a better way. We have the ability to have our voices be heard in a different way. And for our community's response to be boarding up, to be saying, we are afraid of large gatherings of predominantly Black people. I feel like that was not the response that we were really advocating for. So we left our windows unboarded, and we have had our Black Lives Matter signs up in the windows since then. They're still in the windows up on the upstairs floors. And it was really powerful to participate in those other ones. I'm sorry, I'm kind of going a little long. It was something I just feel so passionate about. I mean, it was really interesting. The other reason why I felt really excited to be at that first one and to be at the other ones is, there's all these protests that have been going on for years now, but they're in major big cities. And it was really inspiring to see something like this happening in Freeport, in a place where we do still experience this. It's not unheard of to have racism, be around us and be something that is put on to our other citizens and such. So it was really cool to be a part of that and to see it from all these different sides, and ultimately, get those final ones that I went to. They were really, really powerful, and the speakers they had there, the messages they had to share, they were very emotional and they were very necessary. And I hope that there were some people who, maybe learn some things from that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it infuriated me to no end when all that was going on, and I was driving through downtown Freeport, and they have an armored car parked in front of the courthouse, mm-hmm. which to me just drives me insane. Because first of all, I feel like, it's kind of it's a giant middle finger to a peaceful protest. It's a way of saying, like, you're allowed to do this, but if you get out of line, we're going to kick your ass.
Yeah.
Which I felt like was insanely uncalled for. And I could go off on a side tangent as to why the city of Freeport has one of those to begin with. I mean, right. Nobody's invading Freeport. Okay. Right. It was such a bizarre time. And obviously from, this, I could say I'm a big supporter of Black Lives Matter. I had been from the very beginning, but it was such a bizarre summer. And I live over kind of by Reed Park, and I had a Black Lives Matter sign in my front yard, and came out one morning to find out that somebody had attempted to set it on fire. Which made me laugh because it was a plastic sign and somebody tried to take a lighter to it. I just more laughed at the idiocy. It was probably somebody in the middle of the night ran by and tried to just flick. Oh, it's not catching, and ran away. But it amazes me that something like saying just the phrase Black Lives Matter is controversial. Like that in and of itself, I still get floored and struggled to wrap my brain around that sometimes. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about people who are Americans, people who are citizens of this country, people who, hereditarily speaking, have probably been here longer than most of us, simply trying to say, hey, could you not kill us?
Yeah.
And somehow that becomes anti-police and anti-patriotic and all this other stuff. Yeah. I really, really struggle to wrap my brain around it. It's And I get that it's a bit of a nuanced issue. There's a lot of layers to that,
Yeah,
because being Black Lives Matter doesn't for a second mean that I'm anti-police. I'm not at all, like
yeah,
not at all. But we also can't sit here and look at the blatant data and evidence that we have in front of us and doesn't say there probably needs to be some
right.
serious restructuring, some serious retraining, instead of just flat out saying, well, as long as you're wearing a badge, you're a hero and we're not going to question you.
Exactly. That brings me back to, kind of even the township position of acting as a checks and balances system. And that's just for our budgetary, for our officials and stuff. But if we could create more checks and balances systems within our everyday systems, within every single one of our systems, then yeah, exactly that. We can, if it's that exact idea of, yeah, we're not against police. We don't want to necessarily get rid of all police, defund the police doesn't mean to get rid of every police person and just blow up the whole system. It means let's demilitarize it. Let's put the money into resources that actually help our communities, that bring down crime. And I'll even, there's a lot of, I was, listening to a lot of podcasts about, the history of our police systems, the history of our prison industrial complex. There's books on books and research and sources about that talk about what these things have been rooted in and how they were created, and that, we want to be protected as the community, sure, but we shouldn't be just making villains out of thin air. And I'll bring again an experience that we had around that time. We were sitting out on the patio of Pub 219, that one of those weekends where there was the curfew, and it was very interesting to watch military vehicle after military vehicle drive past us and head over that bridge to the east side. It really says a lot about, our systems. Again, these are people who are frustrated with being targeted with, with large police presences in their neighborhoods when there doesn't necessarily need to be. And, my first thought was, where are the military vehicles in Cherokee Hills? Where are they on Marvin Lane? Where are they in all these places? All these people, there were a lot of rumors going around about all the people who were supposedly going to go to the rich white neighborhoods and do stuff. And I mean, those were all baseless, of course, too, and pretty racist and not founded, I guess. But it was interesting to see the response to people being upset at being targeted, the targets of police brutality being then targeted by police brutality, in that sense, being set in this kind of, what was the word that I'm looking for? The kind of militarized state of lockdown, in that sense. Why was one half of our community in a deep lockdown while, and I love Moritz, and it's not a dig at Moritz, but, they actually had Illinios, that night that they were putting music on, and they had Illinios come and talk about the protests following day and such. And that was really powerful and awesome. But though there were 20 white people sitting outside of Moritz at the strike of 8 p.m. when the curfew happened, and not one person, there wasn't a policeman around to rally them up and say, get home because there's a curfew, but there were military vehicles in the east side to make sure that people were staying in check. And I think it was a perfect example of the thing that, a lot of these communities are fighting against.
And I want to clarify to people who aren't from Freeport, don't live here in Freeport, the distance from downtown to what we in Freeport call the east side is a very short distance.
Yeah.
We're not dealing with a city that's New York City and be like, well, they were leaving them alone in one bureau, but cracking down another. It was within shouting distance.
Yeah.
You could hear, and yet that was, and I felt, and you saw this a lot nationally with a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests that was going on, where there's a protest to try and fight against police brutality. And the response is to show up in riot gear with tear gas and beat the crap out of people in the street.
Yeah.
I don't know if that, were you trying to be a stereotype? Were you trying to prove the protesters right? Your response to police brutality protests is police brutality. That didn't make any, Yeah, I could go on
Yeah.
for days about that,
I know it's
but
yeah, ironic, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think, and I'm sure you'll have thoughts on this because the thing that I'm finding the most frustrating that's happening right now is this sort of need by people to compare what happened at the Capitol to the Black Lives Matter protests, which
Curious if you bring that up.
aggravates me beyond no end. Like to
Yeah,
me, it seems so intellectually dishonest.
yeah,
Like you're clearly not taking time to understand, first of all, the purpose behind the two different things, the ramifications behind the two different things. I'll let
yeah.
you go. I want to hear your thoughts on
Yeah, no, I'm
it.
kind of in the same boat that you are. That has been, like I said, I'm pretty vocal on my social media. Not so much Facebook. I kind of stay away from Facebook most of the time, but on my Instagram and such, and my Twitter, I tend to be a little more vocal about my feelings on these things. But it has been hard, and to speak to friends and family members who say that exact sentiment. They say, well, it's just the same as what was happening in the summer with Black Lives Matter. And it's infuriating. And sometimes I just don't even have the words. I don't always, sometimes I feel like there's no discussion to even be had. Many people just have their minds made up, unfortunately, but it's a stark difference between peacefully protesting, or being a part of the largest civil rights movement since the 60s, to bring up like things that we know exist. Like I said, there's books on this, there's information, there is hundreds of years of evidence of this kind of stuff happening, and it never subsiding, it never changing. In fact, it just being, made even more easier. And to have people rightfully be upset, and a few, like I said, straight individuals, or upset individuals, rightfully so. I mean, I like I said, I don't condone violence, but I'm not surprised, after years of having violence against you, what do you expect? So like I said, it's to see a structured movement happening with a few unfortunate circumstances compared to a blatant conspiracy from our former president, just because, and this is a former president who personally, and like I said, I might be being pretty candid right now, who had investigations into his fraudulent election in 2016. I wouldn't say even fraudulent, not
Outside.
necessarily. Well, yeah, I don't know. Just an election that not a lot that had investigations around it to say things were not done correctly. We've learned new things about how our systems can be impacted from outside forces, how they can be impacted by, our social media and things like that. So then to see this conspiracy just being brought up to people who just blindly follow, to, like I said, a few individuals had created negative experiences around the Black Lives Matter protests. But what happened at the Capitol was entire groups of people doing that exact same thing, and much worse. Nobody was, breaking into the Capitol during the Black Lives Matter. In fact, there were so much riot gear, so many police lines at those kinds of places that would have never been possible. It was infuriating to watch an entire summer of people being tear gassed and rubber bulleted and hurt and beat up and killed, injured for the rest of their lives, in the streets for peaceful protests. I think back to the violin protest in Colorado, and I cannot remember his name right now, for that one guy who died from that. A peaceful violin protest in a park was met with riot gear and tear gas, to a bunch of families sitting in a park listening to music to mourn the death of an innocent life. Whereas people, we saw video of certain police officers letting people into the Capitol, police officers off duty participating in this kind of thing. People being held by the hand to walk down the steps of the Capitol, just a very stark difference in treatment of, it just really showed a lot of white privilege to me. And, one was an insurrection and one was a civil rights movement.
Right.
And I don't really know how to help anybody, understand those differences if they can't get it already. I don't really have the answers for that all at this point, I guess. I think it just takes, continuing to be vocal, continuing to be transparent, and continuing to hold people accountable and to hold these experiences accountable too, that these are very different things. And one was not right.
Well, and I think it's important, and I will say this every day to anybody who needs to hear it. There was no fraud in the 2020 election. Just stop it. Just stop. What you had was a man who lost an election, who hates losing more than anything. And in his entire life, whenever he's run afoul, he's always had excuses that have ranged into outrageous territories to why he lost, because it's impossible that something like this would happen to the great and wonderful Donald Trump. So if he lost an election, it had to be stolen. It had to be rigged. That's the only possible way he could lose an election. Never mind the fact he's a piece of shit and we just don't like him. Like, that's entirely possible too. That's
Right.
aside. But what you had, just like you were saying, and I love the way you put this, is one was an attempt to overthrow a fair and open election in the United States by storming the United States Capitol building. And one was anger over their treatment by the power structure that exists. They are two vastly different things. Was there destruction of property in both? Yes. Am I okay with either one of them? No, I'm not. But they both happen for very, very, very different reasons. And I think that one of the unfortunate things that we've come to as people is that it's far too easy to just react to what you see directly in front of you rather than giving something context, especially if it's something you disagree with. That's really, for some reason, that's really hard for people to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, I'll say one other thing. People were not showing up to the Black Lives Matter protests with zip ties and with lists of people to assassinate. There's a difference, that I think we're very lucky that what happened at the Capitol is all that happened at the Capitol. I think there were other intentions, and like I said, that was, a couple broken windows from a civil rights movement compared to actively trying to murder people, officials who think differently than you is very different.
Well, and it was the contrast of 6 months ago having people angrily waving black the blue flags and signs to actively knocking over police officers over with those flags to get into the Capitol building lends me to believe that for you it was never about back the blue to begin with anyway. It was about something much deeper that you're not being honest about. So
yeah. No, you're absolutely right. They murdered a police officer. I don't think that's very back the blue. I don't think, everybody has their special taglines that they say and the things, their rebuttals to arguments, but I think actions speak louder than words. And, like you said, it doesn't feel like it was necessarily about making sure that our police are protected or that they are, treated well, or that there are systems to make sure that like I said, our systems are checks and balances. It did feel like privilege and an I didn't get my way attitude.
Yeah, if you were going to make a movie about what happened and not title it White Privilege, I don't know what else you would call it, because that's like, if it was on full display, it was so blatantly obvious that I feel like I've said before, I think you're just being intellectually dishonest if you're not about calling a spade and what was going on there. Thankfully, we're in a position where hopefully some cooler heads are prevailing, but this whole QAnon thing is just bizarre.
Yeah, I don't even know where to begin on that. I try to stay informed so that, obviously, but most of the time, whenever something about QAnon comes across my newsfeed, I'm just like, swipe. I can't handle this right now. I've got a lot of stimulus going on already. But yeah, it is, I don't know. And the fact that, there were a lot of calls, January 20th, Donald Trump's going to be president and all these things. And pretty much on that day, the main guy came out and was like, yeah, this isn't real anyway. And it's like, and the likelihood of a new person stepping up and saying, I am the new leader of this, I'll say movement, not the word that I feel like saying, but just, again, a lot of conspiracies in contrast to a lot of people with information and facts. So it is frightening to me. I think, the internet is a valuable resource, but it is also a very scary place in this day and age. And like I said, without checks and balances, I feel like for the last 4 years, Jack from Twitter, Mark from Facebook, all these people just kept letting stuff happen. And then within the last couple of weeks of Donald Trump's presidency, suddenly they're starting to crack down on him. And it's like, you wish you were here a couple of years ago, it's hard to go back. I mean, I come from a background, where I have, been indoctrinated a lot of ways, and I will leave it at just that for now. But having been a person to come out of that and to see these tactics and strategies of the brainwashed, to be candid again, it's easy to spot. And I think that's why I am so vocal and so adamant about spotting that and acknowledging it and bringing that to light, because I have been on the inside of those things before. And to know, I think it's a formula, and it's a really unfortunate one to go down that rabbit hole and like the amount of fake and not fake, but absolutely fake, but I want to say a better word, like incorrect information out there when there's a wealth of other information that could be used. I don't know the answer. I'm really curious what's going to be happening, when Donald Trump has been compared to Hitler and Mussolini and things, and his followers will always fight you on that. But there was a difference when Nazi Germany was no longer Nazi Germany. There was accountability to be had. There was people were not going to be behaving that way anymore. And it's hard to be where we are now and hopefully moving forward in a different way, but being afraid of these depths of the internet just kind of getting deeper and deeper. I mean, with things like Parler, just a lot of places for these kinds of ideas to manifest that have, again, no checks and balances, no sources. And I that kind of frightens me.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right. And we're ended up in this weird, bizarro world where it's one thing for a politician to give a speech or to say something and maybe slightly bend the truth a little bit to put themselves in a good light, versus somebody who is the president of the United States, the supposed leader of the free world, saying outright blatant lies.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just completely 100% false in every notion of the word.
Yeah.
And having millions of supporters eat it up like it's Bible gospel. How do you even begin to find a middle ground with that? How do you even begin? I mean, when it was right off the bat, when his presidency started and his press secretary used the term alternate facts, what are you talking about? It's either the facts or it's not. If you're just going to flat out make up whatever it is you want, then as a democracy, we're kind of screwed, because it's kind of hard for us to then say, okay, you think this, where can we meet in the middle? When one is true and one is 100% false, but that side believes it's 100% true. I don't even know how you even begin to have those conversations that don't end in unfriending and blocking and, and all that stuff.
I do find it hard. I feel like in the beginning of a lot of these things, I was, and like I said, I'm pretty vocal, but I, tended to be like, let's talk about it. Let's discuss, let's debate. And now I'm just like, I'm not gonna, I pretty much just say, I don't discuss ideas with fascists. I don't, if what you're saying is in line with fascism, then it's not going to be something that I'm going to participate in, because it just needs to be shut down. And I think, like I said, I don't really have a lot of the answers for where do we go from here. But one feeling that I have is, with our new presidency, I think, just because a Democrat is in the office, and I have my own opinions about that as well, and how that election process went in the primaries. But I do think that there's a difference between hopefully, I'm hoping, I mean, we're still pretty early, but I do think the people, who are my age and within my feelings and beliefs might feel this same way. I think that isn't it a time to just blindly follow a Democrat, like, the same way that Trump's followers followed him and just went for everything he said and just ate it all up and took it at what he said and whatnot. But to hold our representatives accountable, even if they're on the right side as us or on the same side as us. I think Joe Biden has a lot to prove and a lot to do, and he might not be perfect, and he might not get everything done. And, it's a lot easier to break things than to fix them. So it's a long uphill battle. But I think what we can do on our side is hold our officials accountable, like hold our president and our senators and our Congress members, even if they are on the same ballot as us, completely accountable for their actions. And like I said, not just, this is the president and I'm happy with it, and now I'm gonna not be active in politics anymore, but to keep consistent with that mentality of what do we need to do. And now that we have somebody who might actually listen to us when we protest Black Lives Matter and the need to fix our systems, scream louder, to say, we're not shouting into a black void now. We are talking to somebody who might actually hear what we're saying and take it, for bits and pieces of what it is. But I think the biggest thing that we can do is not be like the opposite, and to hold our people accountable without just letting them ride it out and where we were.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I remember a couple months ago, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who voted for Trump, and it was kind of interesting because I kind of got the feeling like he was beginning to soften on the whole liking Trump thing, but wasn't quite ready to fully admit I might have screwed up. And I told him, I said, the biggest thing to keep in mind is, like, my whole mentality behind the whole thing is that I am not beholden to a party. I am not beholden to a person. I'm beholden to a set of ideals. And if somebody comes along and I think they are, a great presidential candidate and they check mark all the boxes for me, I'm going to think they're great. I'm going to campaign for them. I'm going to put a sign in their front yard. I'm going to vote for them. Once that person's in office, that doesn't mean that they get a free pass to do whatever they want from me at all. Like, if day one he betrays two of those check mark boxes, I'm gonna be angry about it. I'm not gonna try and defend it.
Angry.
Right? Yeah.
He's already.
Well, and it's gonna be interesting to see what happens over the next decade or so, because there's this growing schism within the Democratic Party of sort of like the older, I guess, I've heard people use the term corporate Democrats, and sort of like the progressive wing of like the AOCs and Bernie. It sounds weird that I didn't put Bernie into the old group, just considering his age, but he's amazing, and I wish him well. Well, all right. Well, we're getting close to wrap this thing up. I do want to say that you definitely got my vote, and I'm going to have to. But do you still got yard signs you're handing out?
I do. Yeah, I have a couple still left over, so I can drop one off to you, or if anyone else who listens to this podcast wants, they can feel free to message me on my Facebook, and I will drop it off myself.
All right. Well, fantastic. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on. And I'm really hoping in the future, look out for it. I'll reach out to you and say, hey, we got to do this thing again. So
definitely.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, well, thank you again for having me on here. I really appreciate you reaching out and considering my platform. I mean, that's just a really cool opportunity to get that spotlight. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Well, thank you so much, Chloe. We will say goodbye to all the listeners out there, and we'll see you again next time.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.